Hi there, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is David Bentz, and I run the Business Services Division here at Advisicon. I've had experience working in many different industries, and a common struggle I've seen across both corporate and nonprofit groups is knowing what software tool to use for a given task. Now today we're going to be focusing on Microsoft Lists. Microsoft Lists is a Microsoft 365 app that helps you track information and organize work. Lists are simple, smart, and flexible, so you can stay on top of what matters most to you and your team. We're going to take a look at a couple of different scenarios where you may want to use lists instead of Excel or Planner, along with a brief overview of how to set up and use a list. Whether you're a project manager working with a software development team, an IT manager for a small company, or an event planner for a local community nonprofit, lists can help you get and stay organized. Let's jump right in.
Here at Advisicon, our amazing team of trainers, developers, and technology consultants want to help you maximize your productivity and impact. And we do that through a blend of technology and methodology consulting. For today's presentation, we're going to be looking at what Microsoft Lists are and when to use a list instead of a spreadsheet or a planner board. And then we're going to spend some time with a demo of how to use Microsoft Lists. Microsoft Lists is a new interface for an old tool. SharePoint lists have been around pretty much since the beginning of SharePoint, and it's a way to manage and interact with different types of data. Microsoft Lists is a relatively new offering within the Office 365, Microsoft 365 suite of applications that provides a new way to work with lists and some fancier ways, as you can see, to put some formatting and to be able to organize, sort, group, and view your data. So now we want to look at when we might want to use a list versus a spreadsheet or planner. We'll start with lists. You probably want to use a list when you need to have multiple views for data in different contexts. You want to be able to group the data. You want to be able to look at different filtering, look at who things are assigned to, be able to look at different types of different contexts for the data. And you might also want to use it if you need version history on individual items. One of the things that SharePoint lists allow you to do that are not allowed in Excel is the ability to actually track the version history and all the edits that are made to every item within the list, and to be able to roll back to something should somebody make a change that maybe you don't like. And then finally, you might need the ability to control visibility and the ability for users to edit data within your list. This is an area where lists excel over some of the other tools that we'll be talking about here. However, good old trusty Excel is definitely what you want to use if you're going to be working with really large data sets. SharePoint lists have a limitation of being able to not see more than 5,000 items in a standard view without proper indexing. So if you've got a really large set of data that you need to be making edits to, you're going to want to stick to Excel. Also, if you need to be able to use complex financial formulas or other comparison data or being able to cross-reference data across multiple sheets, again, Excel is still going to be the better tool for you. And also being able to manually bulk edit large amounts of data at the same time, or if you need pivot tables and charts. However, I will say that lists integration with Power BI is allowing the ability to report and display data from your list much more simply than it used to be. So that's going to continue to improve, I think, as we move forward. And finally, Planner is a tool that's often used for task management, especially if you need integration with To-Do, with your personal tasks, your team tasks, and other things within the Teams task app. And also if your team is used to working in a more Kanban type environment for some agile project management methodology, and you need to be able to collaborate quickly and easily on tasks and have anybody to be able to add information to a given task and maybe have a conversation thread around it, Planner is still probably going to be your best tool in that scenario. So we've kind of talked a little bit about the overview of the different tools, and so now we just want to dive in and we'll take a demo and I'll show you how to use Microsoft Lists. To begin, we'll open up a browser window and go to the Office 365, the office.com homepage. Now, I've already navigated to the All Apps link, which is down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, and we can see that the Lists application is showing over here on the right. Your list will probably look different than this based on which applications you have enabled in your environment. You can also go to the Lists app by clicking on the waffle app launcher icon in the upper left corner of your window. And if it's not showing in your apps list here, you can click the All Apps link down in the bottom of this list to show the alphabetized list of all the apps that you have in your tenant. So I'll click on Lists, which will take us to the Lists homepage. It's a pretty straightforward kind of shortcut page that shows you all the recent SharePoint lists that you've viewed, as well as any lists that you've highlighted and favorited. And so we can see, there's different lists and different groups. It also, you can see here that it shows which Office 365 group each one of these lists is associated with. Now, to create a new list, we just hit the New List button here at the top. And you'll see we have three primary methods for creating a list. Now, our first option here is to just create a blank list, and we're just going to call this test list. Cool stuff is what this is. And we're going to pick a color for it. We'll just make this one green, and I'm a little bullseye maybe. Now, a quick description on the Save To function here. We have several options here. The default option listed here is My Lists, which is kind of a private Office 365 group similar to your OneDrive that is really mostly intended if you're just creating lists for your own use. If you're creating this list to be shared with other folks in your team or in your organization, you'll want to attach it to an Office 365 group, and so which was basically a SharePoint site. And so what we'll do here is we'll pick the SharePoint site that we want to connect this to. I've created a site previously for this demo, and we'll go ahead and let it show it in the site navigation. We'll click Create. As we can see, we get a very simple blank list that just simply has a title column, and we have to build the rest of this list from scratch. Now, since we don't really have time to do that today, we're going to show a couple of options for building lists faster. The next option in this list is to create a list from Excel. Now, if I want to create a list from an Excel document, I can simply pick an Excel file from any files that I have here, and I'll click Next. And as long as I have data in that Excel file formatted in a table, I'll be able to pick which tables are here, and it figured out that there were column headers. And I can pick which field I want for this and which field type I want. And if there were multiple columns, I could pick the rest of those, and it'll also import all the content. So I'll just click Next. And OneNote shortcuts. And I'll pick a different color file. And this is like fun stuff here. Once again, we'll put it in that same SharePoint site. And after a few seconds when the list is created, we'll see that this list has content in it already, which is really pretty helpful. So if you have data and you want to basically create a list that already has content in it, you're going to want to use the Import from Excel option. The third option that we have for creating a new list is from an existing list, which allows us to pick an existing SharePoint list. Like, let's say, for example, we just want to copy something from that webinar group, and maybe I want to copy this work progress tracker. And we'll go ahead and make it in that same group just to keep it there. We'll note that while it copied all the columns in, it didn't bring over any of the content. So this does allow you to kind of basically create your own versions of a SharePoint list template, but it doesn't copy the data over. So if you do have data that you want to bring in from a templated list, you're best off creating that in an Excel file that you then use to create new SharePoint lists. Now, finally, a corollary to that last function that we just showed of copying an existing list is the ability to create a list from a template. Now, Microsoft has provided these 8 templates here as ways to kind of maybe pre-build your list with some given scenarios. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at a couple of those. First one is this issue tracker. Now, the issue tracker is a good list for if you're a development team that needs a simple way to kind of track maybe some bugs in a software code that you're developing and you're not already using a tool like Jira or DevOps. You can just use a simple list like this to be able to track issues, descriptions, status, who it's assigned to when it's reported, or even just to have users reporting information about that. Another scenario for using this type of a list would be if you're a smaller organization that maybe doesn't have a dedicated help desk function, but you still want to be able to track requests from users for software support. This would work very well in that case. Now, maybe another scenario here would be using the event itinerary list. This is a great list template if you're planning, say maybe in a seminar or a workshop series, and you want to be able to track all the different types of session information here, and there's already pre-created columns for the different types of sessions, the different codes, descriptions, all that other kind of information that might be useful to you in setting up that event. And so this is kind of a good starting point for some of that. And finally, maybe there's another scenario here for particularly smaller organizations in the area of asset management. Maybe you don't have a full-on asset management system, but you do want to track the status of various equipment that you own, maybe software licenses, computers, accessories, and where they're assigned, whether or not they're broken, out for repair, in use, and all the various other details around it. If you want to track serial numbers, you could always attach receipts for purchases, so on and so forth. For the purposes of our demo, we're going to create a work progress tracker. Because this task here, this list already has a bunch of things that would be helpful for a lot of organizations that are maybe just kind of trying to put some organization to their task management systems. Now we'll see that I already have a list with this name, so I need to create a new name for it. So we're just going to call this Demo Work Tracker. And what is our list about? Making the world a better place. Because we always want to do that. And we're going to make this a nice calm blue color. And we'll use our little checkbox here icon for the clipboards. As you'll note, these icons right here are used to kind of provide a graphic representation on the list showing here. As of right now, as of the date of this presentation, these icons are the only options that are available, and there isn't an option to upload custom icons. That may change in the future. I'm going to go ahead and add this to our demo site. And now we have our basic lists page. And I'll kind of give you an overview here of the anatomy of the page here. So across the top row here, we have all the different columns, which are basically the different fields that we've preset for this list. And we can add new columns here. You pick a type of the field. So these are all the various different types of fields that we can add to a list. And then you'll be able to add in information about that once you've selected it. Across the very top of here, the new button is to create a new item, a new record in this list. The edit and grid view gives us the ability to basically edit items in the list more like an Excel function, so you don't just have to edit things one at a time. If we want to share this whole list or selected items with someone who's not already a member of the list, we can do that. We can export the data to Excel, and I'll go over automation and integration in a little bit. So for starters here, we're just going to go ahead and click the new button, which pops up the new item form. And we're going to just call this Figure Out How to Use Lists. And the description is just whatever we want to put in here. So we'll just say get her done. Now this category field is a pre-formatted multi-select pick list. And so we can see we've got all these different stages of what the category is. And so this might fit in the planning phase. And since this is a multi-select field, we can also select maybe it's a research item as well. So you can kind of think of this setting as more like a tag for this item. We can set the progress here. It's not started, or maybe we've gotten started, so we're kind of in progress here. And this is a pretty critical priority. We've got to figure this out. And our start date, we'll just mark it as today's date. And you know what? We'll give ourselves a week to kind of figure it out. And we can put a name in here. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my own name. And then if you wanted to add some notes or attachments, or if you had any additional fields in this list, you would be able to populate them as well. As we can note here, the only item that's required is this one with the little red asterisk sitting next to it. So it would be possible to create items with nothing but that filled in, but we wanted to go ahead and populate the rest of this data. So once we save that, we'll see that here is that item all listed out. Now we're going to go ahead and jump over to another list just to kind of show you some data that's already been pre-populated. So one of the easiest ways to get back to your main lists page is just to click on the word Microsoft Lists up here in the corner, which will take us back to the MS Lists homepage. Now we're going to pull up this project requests list. And this is an example of a list that has been set up to track requests for new projects within an organization. And so there's a series of fields here that are set up for, kind of basic information around the request, and we can track the status of it here in this list. Now, as we mentioned before, the grid view helps us to bulk edit items, and so we're going to go ahead and show that, because as we can notice here, if I zoom in a little bit, we can see that the desired start dates in a lot of this stuff are in the past. And so we want to go ahead and change all of these dates, or at least change a few of them. Let's change this one right here. And we're going to say that, we're going to start this now, 10/15. And similar to Excel, I have the ability to actually fill down into other values. I can either, just copy this value by, using Control-C, Control-V. I can also hover over the bottom right corner here until the cursor turns into a plus sign, and I can drag it down to fill the same values down to multiple entries. So once we're done making our changes and our edits to the various parts of this, we can go ahead and hit Exit Grid View, which will save all the changes that we've made. Now, one of the powerful additions to the lists application as it's been released here is the ability to quickly and easily apply conditional formatting to your list. You can see on this list that we've already got conditional formatting applied to this column that colors these fields based on the status choice, but we can go a lot further than that. And so the easy way to access the formatting is up in the right corner where we see the list view drop down. It's currently set to all items. If we click the little drop down arrow here, down at the bottom we can see Format Current View. And we can see there's an option here to format our overall list. So for example, if we wanted to use the alternating row styles, we can create a banded row table, which I find to be an easier way to look at some of these bigger lists if there's something there. If you wanted to highlight an entire row based on the value of a date, we could do something like that second value here, to where we're going to see if our desired start date is before today. We'll go ahead and highlight that entire row red. And so we could see this would be a way to call out the entire row. Now maybe we don't want to do this, so we're going to go ahead and go back, and we're going to use the banded rows instead, and we're going to save that. Maybe we just want to highlight the individual cell if there's something going on with it. So now we would go ahead and go to the Format Columns section here, and we can pick a particular field. Now, if we look at the status field, we'll see that because it's a multi-choice field, you have this option to format what they call choice pills. And so if we hit the Edit Styles button here, we can see that based on whichever selection is here, we're going to go ahead and color it a certain color. Now, if you wanted to change that, we want to say maybe approved is actually like a dark green color instead of dark red, and then we save that, we'll see that that'll change the values that are set to approved once we leave this page. It also allows us to do other conditional formatting, or if there are values that don't fit in here, we can choose some other standard formatting. But we're going to go ahead and look at our start date. So we have a similar function here to where we can either format the dates, kind of basically do a banded color based on the dates that they are, or we can use a conditional formatting rule here to once again key off of that date. And we're going to say is on or before today, and then we'll make it red. And then once we go ahead and get out of here and close this, and we refresh our page, we'll see that all of the dates are red because they're on or before today. Now, one of the other powerful tools to use in being able to use a list to view and manage your data is the ability to customize the view and to be able to either group by a particular column or to have different filtered views based on what you need to look at. So for starters, if we wanted to say, I want to be able to look at the various requests here grouped by status, I can hover over this status column and I can group by the status, which then shows me all of the projects that are in the status in the order that the values show up in that list. Now, if I want to go ahead and collapse a particular item, I can just click the caret next to it to collapse it. But if I want to collapse everything at once, I can just click on the caret up at the very top. And then this gives me a summary here. Now, if I wanted to create a view that just automatically had this formatting applied, I can quickly go up into this all items drop-down list here, and I can say save view as, and we're going to save, grouped by status. And we'll save it. And now, if we go up into the all items view, it's kind of our standard view. And then if we go to the grouped by status view, it shows everything here. Now you'll notice that in this view, the grid view button is not available, and that's because you can't edit in grid view if you are grouping by a column. So if you want to be able to use the grid view, you have to have your view set up just to not have any grouping. Another view that I would typically recommend is that if you have a large list and maybe there's a number of things that are assigned to, you may want to only see fields that are relevant to you in this list. So maybe I want to go back to the all items list, and I'm going to do a save as to create a new view. We're going to call this my requests. And now we're going to go in and do some deeper editing to this view. And if we go in and we scroll down to the edit current view, we get taken to the view editing page, which lets us select which columns display. So if we don't need to see every column, we can hide some, we can reorder the columns, and we can also choose how we're going to sort them. And if we want to do a multi-sort, we can do that as well. We can choose, now this one is the key one, is because we want to be able to filter this view to only show items relevant to us. So we're going to check the filter box, and we'll notice over here that we can actually use some dynamic string functions here, either today or me, and I think there's a couple of others that are available as well. But what this allows us to do is it's a relative filter that this view will filter for the current user who's listing there. So if I come to this view, it'll show me the items that are filtered for David Bentz. If someone else comes to the list, they will see the items filtered for them. So we're going to filter where the column, and we're going to pick one of the name fields, which in this case maybe is the project requester, is equal to me. Now maybe we want to add a couple of additional conditions here to say I want to see any of the project items that are related to me. So we're going to say project requester is me, or the project manager is equal to me. And then that'll show requests that I would either be in charge of or have requested. And when we click OK, this list is now filtered for only the requests that are applicable to me as the requester. We're going to go ahead and go back to the all items list here. One other view option that can also be useful in some cases, depending on how you like to look at your data, is underneath this list option is we have the option to either show a compact list. So if it's a really big list and we need to squish the data together, that's useful. But this gallery view also allows us to see a view of the list items just simply grouped in a card fashion with only the first half a dozen or so fields displayed. This will also respect grouping. So if these items are grouped, like for example, we go to our grouped by status, and I change that view to a gallery view, we'll see the groupings here with the card view. If you have a very informationally dense list with a lot of columns on it, similar to this one, sometimes this kind of a view is easier to quickly see the summary because I can always still drill into the particular request and see the detailed information. Now, we've made our list, we've got all of our views selected, and we want to now track information as it's coming in here. Well, here's where the automation and integration for lists can come into play. We'll start with the automation side of things. We have the ability to quickly set a reminder for a particular, based on a desired start date or a requested completion date, which would then allow us to basically say, hey, send me an alert anytime we're coming close to the particular date in this column. So we could then create a Power Automate flow that would then go ahead and do that. We can also create rules that basically will send an email notification. Like, so for example, I want to know whenever a new item is created. And what's cool is that you can select list items from the existing list. And so it'll just automatically, so say for example, if someone's creating a project request and they name someone as the project champion, you might want to notify the champion when they've had an item assigned to them just to make sure that they're aware that it came through. Or maybe I want to just actually have a list item sent to me, an email sent every time something's set up there, which will then create a Power Automate flow that sends an email. Going a step further from that, on the integrate section, sticking to the Power Automate, if we click create a flow, there's a number of pre-created templates that are already set up that we can do things like sending an email when an item is added, starting an approval when a new item is added. So if this, for example, is a project request list, maybe once somebody submits a request, it actually has to be approved by a person or persons before it can be allowed to be continued evaluation. There's a whole bunch of other templates here, and actually the sky's the limit because you can create pretty much anything you want with a Power Automate flow. If you want to be able to customize that application, the form, you can use the Create an App within Power Apps to create a custom forms app. In fact, this particular list is using a custom Power Apps form instead of the standard out-of-the-box SharePoint list form. And the Power Apps forms basically replace the older InfoPath custom form designer that was a part of the Microsoft suite for a number of years. Finally, we have Power BI has a built-in capability to visualize the list, which once we click on that, a just out-of-the-box Power BI report is created that just kind of makes some assumptions and builds a couple of tables and puts some graphics together. This may or may not be anything close to what you need, but the tables are already set up with all the data connections made, so you can quickly change out any of these tables to something that might be more useful to you. And then finally, once we've built our lists, we've set up all of our tracking, and we really just want to continue working in them on a day-to-day basis. Most of us are working in teams these days, and so we want to be able to get at our lists from the Teams channel that we're working on. Well, thankfully, that's also very easy to do. We'll take this Teams that I've got set up for that webinar demo and a channel that I've created for this particular webinar, and I'll just go to the plus sign to add a tab. Now, if you've used the Lists app, it'll probably show up in your recent list, but if you haven't, you can very quickly find it by just typing in Lists, and we'll see it show up right here. And first off, the Lists application will be added to this tab. And then now that it's added, I can either create a new list directly from here, or I can add an existing list. And we'll see that by default, it gives me the list of all the SharePoint lists that are associated with this SharePoint site. And so I can pick any of those. So for example, our demo work tracker that we created just a little bit ago will show up right here. Now that first section that had the SharePoint URL allows you to add a list from any other SharePoint site as well in order to be able to pull in SharePoint lists from other sites. Now the caveat there is that your users in this team also need to be members of that SharePoint site in order to access the list. So if you are adding lists from other sites, be careful, because not all of your users in this team may be able to access that, which may be what you want. But if it's not, stick to adding lists that are part of this team in order to make sure that everybody in this team has access to all the data in it.
That was just barely scratching the surface on what lists can do. But I wanted to give you guys a taste of some of the functionality so that you can dive in and learn more about it. So let's do a quick recap of some of the things we looked at today. We looked at how to create a list, how to use one of the existing templates that are available, or how to import data from Excel. We briefly covered how to customize your current views, and we went over how to add data to a list, work with the data, and then add it to a Teams channel. And yet there's so much more to do. If you have more questions or need more information about Microsoft Lists or anything else in the Microsoft 365 suite, please reach out to us. You can call us, send an email, or reach out through one of our social media accounts. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this webinar, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care.